And then you get to an album like this and you just be like, what? Why? I get that. That's happened to some of my favorite bands. I won't name names, but it happens. Holy smokes, Phil's life is just a tangle of demonic spaghetti. My first thought was, you're just making up these weird fantasy stories about, ghosts and witches and stuff, right? I'm not going to condone all that, but I totally understand and can even comprehend some of the thirst for justice that Phil has at this point. Hey, welcome. My name is Daniel, and this is Metal Sharpens Metal, the place where I analyze heavy music from a Christian worldview. So I'm just getting that part out of the way now because some people are a little confused when I say that, and then I have a Christian thought later, and then they're like offended. Why would you have that? I don't get it. Here it is. There you go. If you want, you can click the button. I am the one that your mother warned you about. For the rest of you who don't mind hearing other viewpoints, or maybe you agree with me, today we are going to dive into Whitechapel. I have never dived into Whitechapel on this channel, nor in my personal life. I probably heard about them when This Is Exile was out, their album, and I was like, at the time, deathcore didn't intrigue me because it was all about how brutal can the vocals be, how fast can the drums be, push that to 11 every single time, and there you go. And I was like, yeah, okay, I've seen the formula, I'm not that excited. However, we're going to go over their later albums called The Valley and Kin, and they are actually pretty intriguing musically too. Like there's a lot that isn't just like super paint by numbers deathcore. And you're probably asking yourself, why are you going over 5-year-old albums at this point and they're not their most recent ones or anything like that? Because somebody asked me nicely on a video. Sometimes that's all it takes. But actually in this case too, there was an extra piece where I was like, I could not stop the research for a little while. It was a little bit too much research. I kind of crammed it all in and I was like, holy smokes. And I was like, wow, this is a very intriguing story about Phil Bozeman's life. That's their vocalist. And he shared a lot of it very openly. And I've got some kind of partiality to looking at familial relationships from a Christian perspective. And hopefully this video can be edifying for us, whether you are a Christian or not. But yeah, we'll dive into all of that after the song. Let's go check it out. All right, prepare yourself.
Can someone give me a circle pit out there? I don't care who starts it. I just want to see it. This one is called Lost Boy.
Boy, it still seems like a bro. I'm not going to stop this a whole bunch of times, but like what? The breath control, the dude is rapping. He's spitting bars. I can't believe it. And this guy, he is so well known in the metal community for his vocals. He's been in lots of features and all kinds of different things. And the fact that he is so fast and so consistent when he does it live like this, and it's just way down here in this register, like this is not the extent of his abilities, but it is telling of a very incredible voice. So let's keep going. Those little accents, they push my buttons in the best ways. And the upbeat strumming. Like those big arpeggiated chords. Oh. I forgot about the triplet vocals. That's like hip hop, right? I want to go back like a few seconds. He just goes into it so smooth too. chords sound like more dissonant. Those little accent. And that fits well with the theme of the song. So, in case you weren't familiar, like I wasn't, with, I mean, this is really cool, the delay on the guitar, but with where Phil's vocals can go. So this is giving me big Opeth vibes. Just the way the tone of his singing comes in. And I just love that. Nice thrashy solo. Man, just a real vibey way to end it. That was good. So I really like how that song can showcase their range and their dynamicism. That's a hard word to say. I just found out. But that song having the just coming in like a freight train and then dropping way down, getting some clean vocals, ending with a big energetic solo and outro. I like that. When I think of the name Whitechapel, my brain goes to just the beginning all the time, just blasting and guttural vocals. But they have a lot more to offer. And I think these albums, they were kind of received with some hesitancy at the time from the fan base. They were like, we don't really necessarily like the experimental times. I mean, some of these songs open with acoustic guitar and it sounds all kind of country and 6/8 swingy and stuff, but overall I think it's cool. And I mean, I'm coming from an outside perspective of like never looking into the band and then finding out about this crazy story and then analyzing the music. Obviously, if you are starting from a place of you like This Is Exile and then you get to an album like this and you just be like, what? Why? I get that. That's happened to some of my favorite bands. I won't name names, but it happens. And also, Phil's enunciation in his vocals are bonkers. Like, I know everybody touches on this, but to have a growl that is that low and then to be able to understand what he's saying for, most of it, except when he's spitting bars at 220 beats per minute or whatever. It's kind of nuts, like how much he can articulate. Because again, comparing him to Mikkel Ackerfeld from Opeth, like he's got a super deep growl, very good, clean singing voice. It's a little bit deeper register. Phil is very similar, but well, first of all, he's kept his growl up over the years. Sorry, Michael, but you know what's going on. But yeah, I love the contrast of his super awesome low vocals with the lower in volume singing as well. And it's beautiful singing. So yeah, Phil is a bonkers vocalist. And the way that he tells stories is very cool. So I'm not going to dive into the lyrics on this song quite yet because it comes like in the middle of this whole epic saga, but I'm just going to give kind of the background because when I started diving into this, Phil put a lot of notes on Instagram and he's mentioned some of this stuff in interviews, and I was just blown away. My first thought was, Holy smokes, Phil's life is just a tangle of demonic spaghetti. But like, jokes aside, it is actually tragic. My heart does go out to him and his family. It is nothing that I would wish on anybody that they would have to go through. So starting at the beginning, Phil's dad died when he was 10, and it shook their family pretty badly. His mom had struggled with multiple personality disorder and other mental problems. I don't know which ones started before he died or maybe were induced because he died. But I guess either way, after he passed, it made those problems worse. And the first song on the first of these two albums, The Valley, the first song is called When a Demon Defiles a Witch. Again, when I hear that, when I think of who I know Whitechapel to be, my first thought was, you're just making up these weird fantasy stories about, ghosts and witches and stuff, right? But no, it's actually pretty bad, and it probably really happened. At least that's what his mom said in her journal, and Phil pulled a lot of his lyrics and other stuff from the journal directly. So yeah, I can't speak to exactly how reliable a narrator his mom was at the time, but I can 100% believe that this was a real event and actually happened to her. I'm not going to get graphic here, and the song doesn't really either in the lyrics, but basically his mom said that she was physically violated by her dead husband at night. She said that he would approach her by her bed at night and do unspeakable things, so that we have the lines in that song about her wanting to burn her bed and just make everything stop. And like I said, I believe that this could have really happened. I think it's worth pointing out that there is a high likelihood that there was real spiritual attack going on in the Bozeman household at the time. The title of the song pulls directly from a line in her journal where she saw herself as the witch that was being defiled by this demonic representation of her husband. And I know that Phil and his mom really loved his dad, Gary, when he was alive. So this is just twisted evil. Like, I do believe demons are real. I do believe that they love to cause trouble and havoc and evil and, violate things that are normal and beautiful. That's like their purpose. And what better way to attack somebody than by going after dead loved ones who they had a good relationship with, and then trying to like warp that view of the relationship in their mind. I mean, again, it's just horrible. It also needs to be said that because in the lyrics, the mother saw herself as the witch, I'm not exactly sure what was going on. Like, maybe that was just one of her personalities. Maybe it's how like she was expressing her self-loathing or something. I'm not sure. So I don't want to speculate too much on if she was actually practicing witchcraft, but this is a great reminder of why the Bible condemns it, because real connections with dark entities actually can be made. And I promise you that they are not just Casper or E.T., flying around trying to find their telephone. To be perfectly clear, I am not saying that Phil's mom intentionally tried to bring this on the family or do anything evil or anything like that necessarily, but I just want to remind us of the suffering that we can bring to ourselves and to those around us when we ignore God's words. So after Phil's father, Gary, passed, his mom remarried, and unfortunately it was to an abusive man who got her hooked on hard drugs and kept, I guess, her and probably Phil psychologically kind of contained at the time. So from the lyrics in the songs Brimstone and Third Depth on The Valley, Phil was tormented enough to have these vivid dreams about how he wanted to kill his stepdad. And so, Phil's mom and his stepdad have passed away, but Phil was processing a lot of it in the lyrics and just kind of telling the story at the time. I'm not condoning everything that Phil says, especially in some of their newer stuff. Like, he's a storyteller. He wants to tell these stories, but it gets dark and it gets close to the line, right? So I'm not going to condone all that, but I totally understand and can even comprehend some of the thirst for justice that Phil has at this point. There was also a suspicion of foul play between the stepdad and the mom, where Phil believes that the stepdad was helping the mom get hooked on these drugs and actually led to her overdose and passing. And Phil was also really young when this happened, so he felt powerless to stop this evil man. One of the songs on the album is called Black Bear, and it uses a metaphor of a huge, predator coming into their home with Phil and his mom and basically wreaking havoc, storming in and, taking no prisoners. And Phil, again, being unable to stop it. So yeah, the sense of frustration and injustice about this whole situation is absolutely palpable when you start to read those lyrics. And again, I feel very deeply for Phil for having to go through this, especially so young. It must have been just tormenting. So in the rest of The Valley, Phil discusses the darkness that was brought on by his stepdad's presence, as well as some of the relief that Phil felt at his passing. And Phil said, like, he never felt good about anyone dying except in this case. And he basically felt nothing. He just wanted this man gone and out of his life. There's one line that Phil says to him beyond the grave, and he says, "The truth shall never set you free." And I forget if in the interviews, if Phil said that his stepdad claimed to be a Christian. But growing up in Tennessee, Phil definitely would have heard Jesus' words that say that the truth actually does set you free. So here in this line, it sounds like he's saying that even Jesus won't forgive what the stepdad did. Phil definitely seems to recognize that his desire for revenge is a form of a disease that's kind of hurting him too. But in this song, he did not hold back about expressing his desire for revenge. And then Kin is a direct follow-up to The Valley, and it takes place after Phil's mom and stepdad have passed, and Phil is trying to leave that era behind. He believes he's kind of come through this hell, and he's trying to move forward. The album opens up with the line, "The devil is dead," which would probably refer to Phil's stepdad. But I think it also can encompass, like, he probably was feeling safe in a sense that a lot of his problems were gone. And then there was an interesting quote from a French philosopher that I think speaks to this, where he says, "The greatest trick the devil pulled was convincing the world he doesn't exist." And I think Phil might be playing off that concept a little bit, thinking that his problems are mostly gone on this album. However, Phil quickly finds out that there is a shadow side to him that is still seeking vengeance. So the song Today Lost Boy describes the inevitability that Phil perceived about this battle against his shadow self. It was going to have to happen eventually. It says, "I see a golden light," which I think is sung from the perspective of the shadow self. And Phil said that that golden light was his room light being on in his house, and it was kind of the only thing glowing at the time. So shadow self is coming to it like a moth to flame, because he says, "For my serpent tongue can only taste the flesh of an only son." This is also the part where he's going 100 miles an hour with his bars, so you can't quite tell what he's saying. The shadow self also says, "No man could ever understand the depths of our brain." So not a lot of people are going to be able to perfectly, commiserate with Phil at that level. But the evil self tries to convince Phil that they can expand their consciousness, which sounds like a pretty Faustian deal. Not a great idea to sign that without understanding the fine print. And there might even be an allusion to being able to get the revenge against the stepdad, even though he's already dead. And there are some other twists on the album too, where the shadow self performs a ritual to try to bring back his dead parents, but they weren't really themselves. And Phil described them when he was talking about these albums as zombies, basically. They were alive, but not really there. It says, "They don't look at us the same, skin is burned, their mind is somewhere else." And then later, the shadow self tries to get Phil to join him by offing himself. So to interject real quick and to kind of go back to that demonic thread for a second, from a Christian perspective, that line would be exactly what I would expect from many demonic encounters. And it's what you hear in a lot of them, how they go. I don't know if Phil really had one either, but I do know that demons, they hate God. They're at war with him. So they hate those who are in the image of God, which would be humans, and they love death. So they would absolutely try to persuade people to consider that option, right? To say either your life's not worth living, there's nothing else for you to do here, so why don't you just, go do the thing you need to do. Or they try to say, hey, guess what? Your loved one that you lost, that you're sad about, they're in the afterlife right now. And when people try to pull them up in seances and stuff, I don't believe they're actually speaking to the ghosts of their dead relatives, but they might be speaking to demons. And if they are, those demons might be trying to convince them, hey, guess what? I'm happy. Like, I'm finally released from pain and suffering. So why don't you come join me by, offing yourself? I would point you to the podcast Haunted Cosmos if you want a good, really deep dive into these aspects from a Christian perspective. And then, they'll discuss things about ghosts and demons and all kinds of other supernatural potpourri. But for now, back to Phil on the album Kin. The album concludes with Phil basically coming to terms with the loss of his parents. The shadow self concedes that even though he really wants to be with his parents still, and he wants to embrace them, he understands and he's willing to let them go so that Phil's life can move forward. And like I said, I'm partial to these songs about fathers and mothers and the relationships that they have with their sons and daughters. The first video I did on this channel was a song that outlined the hurt caused by a father who willingly left his family, and then the son had to pick up the pieces and deal with that. And then later I did a song about a mother who caused wounds and scars instead of provided healing and nurturing. So the impact of parents on their children and their lives cannot be overstated. It is one of the most important relationships that we have on this planet. And I'm not saying that kids can never overcome these things, like if they start in a really rough situation, because they often do. And it's always a huge blessing whenever they win against those odds. But for those of us who are parents and who are Christians especially, let this be a burden on your heart to raise your kids in the fear and admonition of the Lord and just be the best parent you can according to his standards. Like I said, I truly sympathize with Phil's loss and his pain. This is something that nobody should have to go through. I'm not claiming that I went through anything similar to this, but I've seen the effects of touching your hand to a hot stove and I know enough that anybody who touches one will be scarred. So the only way to get through something this catastrophic in your life is through the Savior who was scarred for his people. And Jesus said, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will inherit the kingdom of heaven. Jesus was speaking here about personal righteousness, so it's not just that we can fix a whole world, but if we want to start changing the world, what better place to start than our own hearts and our own standing before God? There is hope, there is resurrection, and there is final justice. So I pray that Phil can find all of that and more someday in the real Jesus, and I hope you can too. Thanks for coming to this one. Hope you like the song, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. Can't see that. I know how to drink water. I'm an adult. I'm a grown man. Also know how to drink milk.
He needs some milk.